In this video, I'm going to talk about how I approach shading when I'm doing figure drawing. The most important aspect for me when I'm doing shading is not to create a very dramatic light and dark effect. It's more about using shadow shapes to describe the actual form. So welcome to my studio. My name is Siobhan, and on this channel I share videos about figure drawing. I generally focus on gesture drawing and contour drawing as a way to develop your own natural and responsive style of drawing. Today though, I wanted to talk a little bit about a topic that I don't often mention because I'm so focused on line work, and that is shading. Line work, or a dynamic expressive line, is probably my main way of expressing something. So often I don't address shading in my drawing because it can get too much to be about the perfection or about the rendering process and less about the dynamic or expressive response in a drawing. There are two things that I always used to do wrong when it comes to shading. One is that I would look at the shadow shapes and see them as just that, as shapes, and then literally colour them in. And that would just end up being very flat on my drawing. And the other mistake that I'd make is that I would generally draw shadows way too dark. So in this video, I'm going to explain how I kind of overcome these mistakes and what I do in my drawing process to make sure that I avoid making them. Here's the video. I hope you enjoy it, and I'll check back in with you at the end. So I should give a quick disclaimer at the beginning of this video. This isn't really a video about the technical aspects of shadows. I'm simply showing you a way that I approach drawing shadows in my own drawing practice when it comes to drawing the figure. I'm not a technical drawer at all by any means, so I don't want to get into the definitions of cast shadows versus form shadows. But if you are looking for an in-depth explanation of these terms, then I'd highly recommend that you check out a recent video from Kenzo over on Love Life Drawing. That video explains exactly what these are. I definitely recommend checking out that channel if you're not familiar with it. So as I say, this is just a kind of quick explanation of the way I draw shadows. My process for figure drawing is nearly always to start out with a gesture drawing and then to move into contour drawing in order to refine the details. In this video, I'm actually going to suggest a way of merging these two separate techniques, and by that I mean drawing contour lines and cross contour lines with a much faster, more gestural kind of way of doing it, rather than what I normally suggest is a very slow contour line. So right now I'm making my composition. I'm kind of roughing out and figuring out through gesture where the full figure is going to be on the page. These lines are just really very loose, and the point is not to make anything too definite at the stage. I always say that. Just start out really light, really loose. But for me, I want to sort of figure out where the head is, where the torso is, and the legs. In this pose, the model's lying down. It's a reclining pose, and usually that's one of my absolute least favorite poses to draw. Generally, I don't like drawing a lying down pose because it's quite often very flat. There's no dynamic quality, but in this instance, at least from the reference image, it's a very beautiful pose to draw. So once I've mapped out the composition, then I start refining it with some more definite lines. When it comes to drawing the shadows and shading these in, a big realization for me was to understand that the shadow follows the form. This might be really obvious to most people, but it took me a long time to realize it, and to understand that instead of just using cross-hatching or just simple flat shading, if I used a cross-contour line to build up the shadow, that makes the drawing look so much more three-dimensional and solid. With a pose that's really long or really tall, a very good thing to do is always to identify the midpoint of the entire pose. And that way you can keep your composition in check. So I just am trying to roughly identify where the midpoint is, then I'll keep an eye on that as I compare it to the reference photo and just, make sure that the rest of the drawing matches up to that midpoint. A normal contour line follows the outer edge of a form as that form moves away from us to where we can't see it anymore, but a cross contour line follows the shape of the form as it moves towards us, so the shape of the form in the front. And that's all that I'm drawing. I'm just following these two things, drawing the shapes as closely to the reference as I can. So the outer contour line should be slow and careful because it is kind of like an edge, but these inner cross contour lines across the forms can be much more loose and much more free-flowing. This way of drawing does take a long time. You'll find that building up the values across the figure takes a lot of observation and a lot of sort of going back over the same area for a while. But the key is to keep your line work going in the direction that you think the shapes are going, if that makes sense. Another aspect to this whole approach is that I try to keep my pencil moving and keep it in contact with the paper the whole time. So even while I'm looking at the reference, then I'm aiming to keep the pencil moving and to keep drawing. And by the way, working really lightly with this is also a very good way. It's the way that you can avoid making that mistake of drawing your shadows too dark, because it gives you enough time to judge the values and build them up slowly as you need to. Okay, so there's nothing really more or extra to say about this. I would encourage you to try drawing a 20 or 30 minute study using this kind of loose, light line work, and try to follow the curves and the shapes of the figure as faithfully as you can while you build up the values and tones in your work. So I hope I've explained how this can help you to avoid drawing shadows that are too dark, and how it can help you to create solid volumetric aspect in your drawing. One last thing that I'll add is that I also think this, most importantly, this way of, or this approach unifies your drawing and gives it an overall cohesive quality because the line work matches the shape and the volume. Thanks again for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got some useful information out of it. Please let me know in the comments below if you also struggle with shading or with applying shadow to your drawings. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic. Or just comment and say hi, that would be great too. And if you're interested in seeing more figure drawing videos, then please subscribe to the channel so that we can stay in touch. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.